So Battlefield V's new map Mercury just came out, and in fact it actually released a day earlier than originally planned. And so tonight I actually had a few hours to check it out. So the question is it any good? Well guys, this is BillyEatWorld again, and let's find out. Alright, so to kick off, if you haven't already heard, before we start, I should mention that the new Mercury map is actually free DLC for everyone who already owns a copy of Battlefield V. And also, the good news is if you've played in about the last week or so, you won't need to download any more updates to play it, because the map was actually part of the last big update patch. So far in terms of game modes, it looks as though Mercury's been included into standard playlists, and there's also a dedicated Mercury playlist that's been unlocked as well. And this playlist rotates between Conquest and Breakthrough on 64 players, which together I think gives you a pretty good idea of all the things this map has to offer. So what does this map have to offer? Well, I think the first thing that definitely needs to be said is that aesthetically, it's probably the best looking map in the game so far. And that's because, as we talked about in a video the other day, Mercury is actually based on the Greek island of Crete, and honestly I think they've done a pretty amazing job of nailing that theme. The map, I think, has got a really good mix of open range and urban CQB areas, and being that it's also a coastal map, there's a fair bit of water as well. But here's where we start to get into what I think are the low points, because unfortunately, you just can't access a lot of the parts of the map that look like they should be really interesting. For example, there's an island out in the bay in the northwestern corner of the map, which obviously is a pretty standout feature, except for the fact that it's in the out of bounds. And not just that, but there's also a big airfield on the other side of the map, which is only accessible in Breakthrough, which kind of limits the size of the Conquest map a bit from what it actually could be. There's also no naval vehicles on the map, which is kind of disappointing because there's no way to make use of all that water. But in saying all of that though, I've got to say there's still plenty of diversity on the map, with lots of little unique areas to battle it out over. Now, one of the interesting things about this map is that verticality is obviously something the devs have tried to focus on most of the objectives. For example, the Sea Conquest flag is located on top of a hill, which ends up being one of the main hotspots because whatever team holds the high ground has a huge advantage. Not just that, but there's also objectives like the Cove, which is a small beach surrounded by cliffs on all sides, where enemies can fire down on whoever is on the burn. And the cliffs almost wall off the objective, and like I said, especially on Breakthrough, it turns it into its own little unique arena that the teams can battle it out over. The downside of all this verticality, as I found though, is obviously that the map is going to be flooded with snipers and bipod LMGs, which I've got to admit is pretty annoying, especially considering, like I said, the Conquest map really isn't as big as it probably could be. And that kind of brings me to my next point, which is that I feel it's a little too busy with 64 players, and I was pretty lucky that I was actually playing in the early morning hours, where servers were only half full. And that's not to say it's the busiest map in the game, because it definitely isn't. And I'm not saying that people won't enjoy the busyness, it's just that personally that's not my thing at all. I'd prefer it if there was less players and more time to think about what you're actually doing. Now, just before you finish up though, another thing I should mention is that in today's official DICE post, they actually mentioned that there will be a different Mercury playlist for next week. And quote, it apparently stays on Mercury, but features other smaller modes, which you'd have to imagine will probably mean 32-player modes if it's still going to include Conquest. And I'm actually pretty interested to see what this map is going to play like on, for example, Rush, because once again, Breakthrough felt good, but it was just a bit too busy. Because not all, but definitely some of the objectives only feel about as wide as a regular Rush map anyway, so I kind of feel like it might flow a little bit better with half the player cap. But with that being said though, I've got to say that all in all, playing Mercury tonight was, in general, a fairly positive experience. DICE have obviously put a lot of time and resources into getting this one right, which I don't think can really be said about some of the other content, in quotes, that we've been getting in Tides of War so far. The attention to detail is pretty insane on this one, which is something that I think people take for granted in Battlefield 5 these days. It really is a pretty amazing looking game. So well done, DICE. Love your work on Mercury, and here's hoping there's more maps just as good or better than this one coming in the near future. But anyway, guys, that's just about all the news I've got for you guys today on Mercury. So as always, make sure you let me know what you think in the comment section below. And in particular, I want you guys to let me know what you like and what you don't like. And if you could, what about Mercury would you change? As always, though, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And please feel free to check out the links in the description if you want to see any more of these videos. And also, don't forget, you can find my Twitter and Discord links down there if you want to keep in touch. And as always, until next time, see you later and have a good one.